Okay, this video is on toy play phase one. Toy play phase one, so the basic idea of toy play. Once you start doing this, as with any play-based training, there's always the window of opportunity and the marks. So before you present the toy, like before you go, you don't walk out and go, hey, look, here it is, and then say, are you ready? Because this is the thing that tells them the game is on the table. I'm gonna say, are you ready? Then produce the toy. Then, yes is reward from me. Get it is reward from away. Again, sounds, words, doesn't matter, but choose your marks and use them consistently, right? So, yes is reward from my hand. Get it is reward's gonna be away from my body, and I'll give permission. So I'll say, are you ready? Present the toy, say the mark before I throw it or let him grab it out of my hand. At that point, we're gonna play a full spectrum game, right? Ideally, you're going to investigate all of the aspects of play. If you do not know what those are, I'm going to insert now. That you understand all the basic aspects of play, you're gonna try to investigate them to any degree that you can. Search, you can fake a throw when the dog goes to run for it, you toss the toy somewhere and then they have to come look for it, so they get a little bit of search involved. Chase, pretty obvious, they can chase me while I hold the toy, they can chase the toy itself when I throw it, I can chase them while they hold the toy. Stalking is pretty easy. Obviously, obedience is stalking. When I ask for obedience, like when I go out and the dog outs and I go down and the dog is staring at the toy waiting for it. In its mind, the dial we're spinning is the idea that if it gets into this position just so and is patient enough, it will be able to access reward. So that's the stalking dial. But even before you begin playing with obedience, you can begin to stalk. While they have the toy, I can kind of, and I'm gonna grab it. In that moment that they think I'm gonna try to make a grab is stalking. I can also get the toy away from them and hold the toy far enough away that they can't get it, and then they do legitimate stalking. Like they aren't doing an obedience position, but they're trying to find an angle, and they can like, oh, and then when it gets close enough, they'll make a strike for it. So you can spin the stalking dial in those ways, right? Fight's pretty obvious. You know, we're gripping the toy and we're fighting with the toy. It's no problem around. But I can put some extra fight into it. I can rough them up a little bit. I can bump them into walls. I can cover their eyes. I can grab their feet. There's all kinds of stuff you can do to increase the fight aspect of play. Celebrating. Celebrating is the one that is really the most important, but it is also the one that people forget about the most because they're not thinking, you know, they're not thinking about emotional regulation. They're thinking about super bananas time. And I want the training games that we use to be kind of a full spectrum emotional thing, right? So I want the dogs to celebrate. It's important, right? Chasing, stalking, and fighting are like high rev. The engine's running real hot. Celebrating and searching, those are going to be decelerate. Consuming is decelerated too. Like if a dog is sitting there gnawing on a toy, it's still drive, but it's a deceleration. So out of the 6 aspects of play, 3 of them are high drive, 3 of them are lower medium drive, right? So I want to be able to toggle all the way through those things, right? So with celebrate, I want to do it in a couple ways. One, victory laps, hugely important. Let the dog grab the toy, let them run a little victory lap, cruise around, you know, decelerate a little bit, nice calm grip on the toy, everything's cool. So victory laps are a really nice way to celebrate. And then bring the dog into your arms. I want an easy on the toy. Super traditional way is put your hand under the dog's chin, stroke down the side, looks like this.
Everybody say hi.
That's the movie that wasn't like that. You allow them to do it free.
Another way to do it is holding the toy in front, and the dog's basically in a front position, and you stroke the dog's head nice and relaxed. Looks like this. And then the other way is to put the dog in the middle, so the dog gets between the legs, and then, you know, you can hold the chin up, or you can hold the toy gently and love on him real nice and easy. Looks like this. Good boy. Good boy. No matter what you do, we want to make sure that at some point during the game, while the dog still has possession of the toy, I can get them cool and relaxed. They can be holding the toy and calm. They're not calm so they get access to the toy. They're calm because I've asked them to chill and they know how to decelerate. Now in that moment it's celebrating. I'm gonna go, good boy, look how good you're doing, and love on them so they feel a sense of celebration, but it's gonna be a deceleration. When I do that, I will not snatch the toy away from them in that moment. If I'm gonna bring them into my arms to celebrate, I'm gonna let them know. I'm either gonna run them back out on another victory lap and then go back into the game, or I'm gonna say a mark. I'm gonna go, yes, and then grab the toy. I don't want them worried about when I'm gonna snatch the toy, because if they come into my arms and they're just like, any second now he's gonna fucking grab it, then they're gonna be stalking in that moment and not celebrating in that moment. And stalking is higher, I want lower, right? So I wanna be easy on the toy. And consuming. Consuming, you can't really do with most toys because it's dangerous for a dog to chew and gnaw. They'll tear up the toy and they might ingest it, and that's bad. But like, for example, a Kong or a rubber ball or something that is sturdy, you could let them sit down for a few seconds anyway and like gnaw on the toy, right? So if you know you have a dog that's super turned on by consumption, get a Kong on a string or something, and then you can let them for minutes on end sit down and consume. They're not actually ingesting it, but the dial they're spinning as they sit there and gnaw on it is the consume dial, right? So your job is to find the aspects of play that your dog finds most rewarding, and also the phases of possession that your dog finds most rewarding. If you've never heard of the phases of possession, your job is to experiment with these various aspects of play and these various phases of possession and find out what is the game that your dog finds the most rewarding, like just speaks to them the most. Like, what is the thing that speaks to them the most? How can you find a way to deliver that game to them in a way that is productive and helpful and works towards your training, right? So you've got to learn your dog and figure out the game that they like to play. Doesn't matter really what that game looks like per se. I don't really care if it's all chase and stalk and a little bit of consumption and virtually no fight at all, and so it looks a little bit more like fetch with some chewing on the rubber ball, or if it looks like traditional tug and there's almost all fighting and stalking and hardly anything else. It's totally fine, with one exception. That one exception is celebrate. You must run victory laps. You must bring them into your arm to get easy, because in every other training game, I don't really care what aspects you play, right? It is more about what the dog finds rewarding, so I can use that for leverage and biological fulfillment. But with this, I must be able to bring my dog down, right? So if your dog enjoys a game that is mostly lower drive anyway, then great, whatever, good for you. But if your dog does shift into one of those three high drive aspects of play, like they really go bananas for the fight, they really go apeshit for stalk or for chase, it's awesome. But you must teach them how to decelerate. They can't just go in the presence of drive objects, I go nuts. That's unacceptable. They have to be able to downshift and bring it down. And not just downshift like do obedience downshift like emotionally downregulate downshift, right? So in toy play, I do insist on celebration being taught. They must learn how to run a victory lap, and they must learn how to come into your arms and get it easy. That's just requirement, right? Like that's part of the gig, you gotta do it. So basic foundational phase 1 toy play, window of opportunity, are you ready? Then present the toy. Yes marks it in my hand, get it marks it when it's away from me. The dog is on a long line. With food training and personal play, I do want people to put dogs on long lines until they have a recall. I like them on a long line. It helps counter condition leash frustration because the leash is a signal for a good thing happening, not a shitty thing happening. The leash is not a signal for we're going outside and going bananas. The leash sometimes isn't for that. The leash means we're going to do something awesome together, not necessarily go travel. And it lets me orchestrate. Like if the dog decides to play keep away suddenly or decides it wants to go for a competing motivator, I can orchestrate the game more to the needs of the training of the day, right? Until you have a solid recall, you must have the dog on a long line. But with toy play, it's extremely important because with toy play, with food play, I have the food you want. With personal play, I have the game you want. With a toy, they'll get the toy and then they'll just go somewhere. And you can't really orchestrate the game if we're gonna play, if the game is keep away with the toy, they're having fun, their phase of possession, I chase them, this is the best game ever, but I'm actually not trying to play anymore. I need to orchestrate the end of the game and I'm having a hard time. So you gotta have a long line until you have a solid, reliable recall, a solid, reliable retrieve. You gotta have a long line on the dog, right? So window of opportunity, are you ready, begins the game. Yes, if they bite out of my hand, get it. If they bite away from me, they're on a long line, so I can teach them how to run victory laps. I can say, bring it, and then reel them back in and begin to play with the toy. I can say, into my arms, or come get easy, and use the long line to bring them in. I can orchestrate both retrieves and celebrations, as well as the end of the game. At the end of the game, I'm not worried about outs in phase 1 at all. I'm not worried about outs at all. At the end of the game, I'm gonna go enough, and then that's it, be done with the game. If I can check out well enough, a lot of times the dog will just drop the toy because it's pretty obvious that you've checked out. A lot of people have a difficult time teaching an out. Like while they're playing the game, they want the dog to let go, and the dog won't let go. But then when they're like, all right, we're done, and they just walk back to the house, the dog spits it out before they get back in the house, right? That's very, very typical. That is because when you say enough and then stop playing, the dog's like, oh, I get it, we've stopped playing. So I'm gonna say enough. If I can take the toy away with no conflict, wicked, awesome. If you can't take the toy away without conflict, it's okay. Just say enough and then stop playing. Take the long line and walk the dog back to the car, to the crate, to the house, whatever. 90% of the time they spit the toy out before you get where you're going. Just leave it, go back and get it later. Doesn't matter. Don't turn around and snatch it because they're gonna think the game of possession was still going. Just leave it there, go get it later, right? If you get back to the crate, car, kennel, house, whatever, and they haven't dropped it, you can always go back out and come back. Usually 90% of the time on the first pass, they drop it before you get where you're going. Sometimes you get there, you have to turn around and go back, wait a second or two. You can kind of stand still at the doorway and just hold the leash short. Half the time they'll drop it. There's a very, 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 very uber minute percentage of the time where the dog won't let go and you don't have time to do a 25-minute death march back and forth from the crate to the car, to the crate, to the car, to the crate, to the car to get them to drop it. Then we might investigate the use of a brake stick, but that is a 1%er, like a legit 1%er. I've seen it twice in the last 10 years. So you probably don't need it, right? Window of opportunity, are you ready? And enough starts the game, ends the game. Every time you give permission for a bite, if the toy is in your hand when they grab it, it's yes. Throw it, toy's not in my hand when they grab it, it's a get it. Investigate all the aspects of play, all the phases of possession. figure out the game that your dog likes. The only one that really I insist that you insert into the game, even if the dog's not super into it, you gotta like teach them to be comfortable with it, is the Victory Laps and Easy Into My Arms. Those are the two that you must have when you're doing toy play. And that's it. Once we get to phase 2, we'll start talking about making interruptions and such. But that's it. That's phase 1. And play long games, man. I can only encourage you to play long games. Like, satisfy your dog. I'm not talking like a 2-minute little teaser thing. Man, play. Like, you read the layered stress model. You understand what I'm talking about. Like, man, fulfill your fucking dogs. Go play, right? If you want to learn more about this, check out Ivan Balabanov's Possession Games video on his website, trainperview.com. It's like a 3-hour video about this, but mind-blowing depth, right? If you think this video is good for like what you just saw, if that's like, oh, that makes sense, that helps me, man, I cannot stress enough that you got to go watch that video. If you haven't watched that video yet, stop fucking with this one and go watch that one. You gotta watch it. Foundational conceptual work for us. Jax, you ready?